Okay, hey everyone. My name is Jeremy Daly, and welcome to another Ampt live stream. Just want to make sure we are live on all of our channels. So we are live here on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, please send us a comment and say hi. We're also live on. Oops. All right, a little feedback there. Also live on, let's see, YouTube, and let's double check Twitch here. We're live on Twitch as well, and one more just to make sure we are live on X/Twitter, and it appears that we are live. I think. What did I do? Let's try one more time. And we might not be live on. I don't know. We might not be live on X, but we are live on our other channels here. Oh, it says it's live. Oh yeah, we're live. Okay, we're live. Okay, perfect. All right. Anyways, all right. So back to Ampt. So I am, again, Jeremy Daly. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Ampt. If you're not familiar with Ampt, basically what Ampt is it provides you or provides teams with what we call a self-provisioning runtime. We use something called infrastructure from code. So essentially you have an AWS account, you have all your AWS accounts, you have an Ampt environment that runs inside your AWS accounts, and then that Ampt environment actually does all of the provisioning and configuration of the underlying infrastructure for you. All you have to do is upload your application code. We are node-based, so we use Node, JavaScript, TypeScript, and you can do a lot of really amazing things with Ampt, and we give you some amazing workflows. If you haven't seen those before, we've got a demo on the website that you can check out, but we'll also go through some of it today as well. Okay, so there's a lot of different use cases you can build with Ampt. Last week we showed you how to do Next.js and host a Next.js site. We showed you how to do Astro sites. We've talked about how the data works behind the scenes, so you can use DynamoDB. We've done some cool things with progressive enhancements of sites. So we've done a whole bunch of things, but one of the things that comes up quite a bit with especially with serverless is this idea of real-time communication, because Lambda functions, if you're familiar with Lambda functions don't give you that sort of connection that you can maintain for a long period of time. You can stream a Lambda function now for up to 15 minutes using a Lambda function URL, which is pretty great, but Lambdas are single connection. They're single concurrent connections for every Lambda that is running. So if you had 1,000 WebSocket connections, assuming you could do those directly into a Lambda function, the problem is that you'd have 1,000 different Lambda functions running, each one running its own node process, each one charging you for data transfer and for compute time just to sit there and wait for maybe there to be a message that gets sent down. So it would be terribly inefficient. It would be really expensive. Obviously, there's other ways to do that. I say obviously, but you could potentially do something like App Runner or Fargate or use ECS or something like that in order to maintain a pool of servers that would do that for you. It just seems like a lot of work and entirely unnecessary. So there are a bunch of ways that you can do serverless WebSockets, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But then there's also something else that's kind of interesting where the overhead of a WebSocket is quite a bit of overhead. Essentially, you have to make sure that the client knows how to deal with WebSockets. You have to have your backend set up in order to configure those WebSockets. There's usually a fair amount of infrastructure that you might have to set up if you're not just using something like API Gateway that we'll talk about. But you also have that's a lot of overhead, right? And sometimes you want some real-time communications, but you don't need to necessarily, set up and maintain that WebSocket connection. So we're going to get into some of that and how you could do maybe something a little bit different using server streamed events, SSE, server sent events. my brain's not working, server sent events that allow you to actually maintain a connection, send some data down over those connections, and then do something with it. And then we're going to use HTMX because it's just a much easier, super simple way to just deal with it on the front end and not have to write any fancy code in order to make some of the stuff work. So anyways, let's jump into some stuff. So first, I want to start quickly just talking about WebSockets in general. So one of the things that was just recently published by Yen Trey, who is a serverless hero, absolute brilliant architect, serverless guru. Definitely check out theburningmonk.com. To get tons of content around serverless and things like that. So he just published an article the other day, which I was already planning on doing this live stream, but the timing is impeccable. That basically 4 different ways in which you can do or which you can implement WebSockets here. So let me just zoom in here so we can. I'll try this way. Okay, so we can see this a little bit better. So the 4 ways that he talks about are API Gateway, AppSync, AWS IoT Core, and then Memento. So just quickly kind of going through it is, API Gateway allows you to essentially have different functions on connect, on disconnect, on message that will maintain the connection for you. There is some information here about sort of the pricing around that, I believe. So 1 million reads, one message at a time. Yeah, one of the things about doing WebSocket connections with API Gateway is it does pretty much do the main stuff for you, but you do have to maintain sort of that list of connections yourself and be able to understand how some of that stuff works behind the scenes in order for you to actually know who's connected and send things out like that. The other option is AppSync. So AppSync is sort of a managed GraphQL service that AWS has, if you're not familiar with AppSync. AppSync is great for doing these subscriptions, but it does require that you set up some GraphQL. You have to have some mutations set up. You do have to set up I think a custom authorizer, or you have to set up a custom resolver in order to do some of the permissions and manage some of that stuff. But it's possible. IoT Core is another really interesting option, and actually at Ampt we are working on an implementation of this to make it super easy. What's nice about IoT Core is that it does maintain all of those connections for you. So as soon as somebody sort of subscribes to a particular channel, then you can send the broadcast to that channel. And of course you can control who can connect and some of those other things. But this is a really interesting way. This to me is sort of the best way to do do broadcast MQTT messages with AWS in a serverless way. We're working on some stuff here, so hopefully we'll be able to have some interesting information about that soon. And then the other thing he talks about is Memento Topics. Memento is a separate company. They do their sort of a serverless cache, and it's very, very cool. They've got topics. They've got a couple other things that they do as well, and it just makes it really, really easy to use a third-party service to do something like that. I would suggest you check that out if that's something you are interested in doing. It's relatively inexpensive, so you can sort of check that out and play around with that. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. One of the things that we can start with is we can start with the complexity. I think let's start with just what it's like to sort of do the WebSocket stuff, right? And we can see how we can accomplish that with Ampt. So if we go over to the docs, we have a couple of different interfaces, actually several interfaces that Ampt makes available to you. And what that does is that allows you to just import one of these interfaces. It's just Node, right? It's nothing, it's stuff you'd be familiar with. And then you can use those interfaces to essentially tell the backend system how you want it to be configured and how you want it to interact, and the services and so forth that you want to be set up with. Let's see, we we got? Can I use AWS Lambda plus Hono plus WebSockets? Oh, there's a question right here from ZZ. Can I use AWS Lambda plus Hono and WebSockets? Yes, you can. And actually, we're going to show you that today. So stay tuned for that. And then Alan Helton, who wrote the article here about, if I can find it, he works at Momento, and he did write a, where is it? Right here. Nice article right here by, oops, I'm not logged in as my thing here, but anyways, about how to use Momento for WebSockets. So again, I would suggest checking that out because these managed services are just amazing. If you want to do it core to AWS and you want to make sure that you're using AWS, then you can do that as well. And again, we're going to show you exactly how to do that. All right. So first things first, one of the biggest problems with setting up any system is getting some sort of boilerplate in place, right? So I have a simple project that I set up that is this HTML or this Hono HTMX demo. So let's go ahead and we'll just use this as sort of a baseline, and that way we don't have to set up a bunch of stuff, and this will give us tailwind and some of these other things as well. So let's go over to our Visual Studio Code here, and then we are going to go into git/sandbox on my local machine, and then let's grab this here, and we are just going to git clone this, and let's call this demo SSE WS. So that'll clone that down. We'll cd into demo -SSE WS, and then we will load this code here. All right, so essentially what we've got here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the git. Oh, not get. How about git? There we go. Okay, just going to remove that so I don't accidentally check stuff back into that project because I do have permission to it. And we could have cloned it, or we could have used the template and so forth. But anyway, so just quickly in terms of what we got here, the biggest thing is our package.json, which just again gives us, we name the app. All right, we'll actually change this here. So we'll call it, what do we call it? Demo-SSE-WS like this. Okay. That doesn't really matter. We have our main route that just tells us where the system is supposed to load your code from. We do use ESM modules by default. It's just cleaner. And if you're using TypeScript, and in this case we are using TypeScript, it'll ES build for you automatically. You don't have to do TS build or any TSC or whatever. You don't do any of that stuff. And then we just have a couple of scripts. We have our dev script. We have a build script. This compile script is just a thing for a templating language or templating system that I'm using that we created called Fraglets. And essentially what this does is when we run dev, this is just running this run p process, which is the npm run all package. So again, we don't have to get too deep into that. It's just sort of a boilerplate for this. In terms of dependencies, we've got Hono installed, we've got Ampt data, and a couple of dev dependencies as well. And then our index file here, which we'll go through because we're actually going to clean up a little bit of this. But anyway, so we've got this set up, and so now we want to actually turn this into an Ampt project. I have not turned this into an Ampt project yet. So all I have to do is run Ampt in my terminal here. This will ask me to select one of my organizations. Obviously, I have a whole bunch because of demoing and whatnot. So this installs the dependencies for me. So this will do all that work for me. I don't have to worry about running an npm install. Obviously, always good practice to probably do that. And then we'll name the app. We'll call it demo SSE-WS. So this will go ahead now, create an app for me in the Ampt system, and then it will spin up an AWS account for me that is dedicated just to me as a developer, and give me a real-time connection to it, which is pretty cool. So it just takes a second here to spin up that account and get that all configured for me, connects to the real-time logs, and now I have over here this URL, which if I open this, this is a dedicated URL for my sandbox. It's not loading anything because there probably isn't anything to load yet. So actually in this particular thing, if I run in this project, just because this was a test that we did a while ago, I can import some data, and then when I refresh this over here, I'll actually get some, some data that's populated in. Now, the other thing that's really interesting about how we do Ampt is we allow you to run a dev server in the Ampt context. So from here, I can type in dev like this. And when I run dev, this will just run whatever I have running under ampt:\dev in my package.json here. I didn't save that. I don't think I made any changes, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and say, failed to save because I might be overwriting something. Let me do this. I won't save that. Open it back up. I always do that. I always make changes to my, I always make changes to my package.json and then don't save it and then do something with npm or whatever that does make changes. So anyways, let me change this again to demo SSE WS like this. And then I should be able to save that, and that should be good. So again, what this does is when I type in dev, it essentially just runs ampt:\dev. So this is doing this run p, which will run this post CSS, which is for my Tailwind, and then this fraglets compiler, which again is for the templating language that we're working with. So essentially, when I do that, now what that actually has done is that's compiled my CSS for me using Tailwind. So now I get the styles here. And just quickly to show you sort of what this does, which again is not super important for what we're doing here, but essentially this does the main/get. It will stream down this users.html for us, which again you can. Fraglets does both the streaming and just loading pieces of templates, but essentially this streams this down and just gets all the users from the database, loops over those users, and spits out the values for them. That gets fed into the template here, which is this users template. And essentially, if I make this a little bit smaller, essentially what this is doing is, let me see if I save this, it'll reformat for me. So what this is doing is there's a block for users. This is Nunjux, by the way. It's just standard Nunjux templating language. But basically, when it uses Fraglets, we can use fragments of that template, which is pretty cool. So anytime you define a block, it uses that. I can use that directly as opposed to having to load the whole template, which is pretty cool for doing some especially stuff with HTMX where you only want to load a fragment and you want to repopulate it. You can pass some data in. Anyways, cool stuff. So that's essentially what that does. And then what we did is we provided a couple of things here where you can, when you click edit, this is when it loads the user with this edit mode. Essentially, this is saying if it's in edit mode, then load this form here. Otherwise, load the the record with the edit button there. And if we come over here and we were to click edit on Sam Smith, what this just did is, I'll show you this here. I'm probably getting into too much detail about how this stuff already works, and we should just jump into the actual stuff here. But so if I click edit here, what this did is this actually made it made a fetch request to this /edit with the user ID /edit, and then what this did is this brought back this HTML that's just within this. This edit block right here, which is pretty cool. So it just allows you to bring back pieces of it, but also have the full dynamicism of the template itself. So it's pretty cool. But again, we can go ahead here and make a change here. So Sam Smith 123, click save, and that will actually submit that. If I refresh this, it won't matter. It'll still be there. But again, this was where we actually saved it here. I think so we submitted the name here, and then I don't know, almost because I refreshed the page. Let me do that again so we can see it. So if I come back, I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I click save. This is it here, and this is what it returns back to me because we have in here in our index. We have a post or put route here where when we send that information in, that is going to render the user again with the updated user information and render it out that way. Okay, that's all fine and good. I'm going to get rid of all of this stuff because we're not going to use this, and I'm just going to get in our way. Let's do this here. Delete. Okay, so all we're going to do now is just return the the main Fraglet stuff here. And one of the things, so there's a couple different things here. So we can do, I'll show you this quickly just so that we have an understanding. And also I'm going to enable compiled templates because they just run a lot faster. So what this is doing here is this is streaming this data to us. So if we refresh this page here, and we look at this, right? So this here is streaming the data and giving us all the information that's getting spit back to us. Now it's actually spitting it back in one big chunk. Actually, this isn't spitting it back in one big chunk, right? Because I'm doing, actually, all right. So. Interesting. So the way that the streaming works with Fraglets, again, is essentially it allows you to specify the template that you want to load directly, and then specify the blocks that you want to stream into. So if we were to add an artificial wait in here, so let me just do import set timeout from timer's promise, and then in here I'll just do a wait set timeout. 2 seconds here, and then save this. So this might be hard to see, so we'll add a little bit of extra context. So if I refresh this, okay, yeah, so we can't really see that. So let's do this. So we'll go to the users template here, and let's see, we've got border. Can we see that? Try border 4. See if that's a little bit more prominent. Okay, so yeah, so now we see that we've got our border there. So what's happened? Oh, let me do this. Let's just give it a little more color so we can see it. So BG, let's say red 100. How about that? Okay, so when we refresh this page here, we'll get this little, this will load first, and then the other stuff will be streamed into it, right? So this works really good. You can do this. This is it's just an implementation with Fraglets, but you can do this with Hono directly, and you can just use their streaming. You can use their streaming capability with Hono, and you can have that populate in, which is pretty cool. And you can just have it go ahead and stream data out to you. But the problem with doing streaming this way is that you do have to dynamically load the page. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Lambda is perfectly capable of loading a page, and generating that page on the fly, especially if you have dynamic content. We showed in another live stream this idea of basically saying, we don't need to, especially if it's mostly static content, right? So if it's like maybe it's a blog post page, or even if it's could be a dynamic page within a backend application, some sort of a web app, is likely that a lot of that content that is loading on that page is going to be static. So you don't need to generate it every single time, or you could generate it, on a fairly regular basis. Maybe you cache the data for a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So that way, everybody who's hitting that page isn't regenerating it every single time. However, there are parts of the page that you may want to make dynamic. So one of the things we showed in one of the other videos was this idea of essentially using HTMX and being able to load basically being able to do an onload, so that when data, when the static page loaded, that would load first. That would give you the first time to, or the first time to byte, or first contentful paint, right? All these crazy terms. Give you that first contentful paint as soon as possible, and then it would make an additional call. And be able to pull down other data. And the way that we did in the past was essentially that each one of those other things were doing a load, and it would load those all at once, because you can't stream data through an or through an XHR request, right? So if you're fetching data with an XHR, you can't stream as the results come back. So your options are either to make a whole bunch of requests, and then as those requests load, then you can go ahead and populate stuff in, or you could say, I'm just going to load, everything at once. So let's say it takes 5 seconds. I don't know why it would take that long, but let's say you're loading a whole bunch of stuff behind the scenes, and you want to populate 5 or 6 different boxes, or five or six different content areas. You go wait for all that to load, and then you could spit that out. So that would work. The problem is that you're going to have to wait for all of that, and the experience is going to be, all right, the site loads very quick for me, which is great. And then maybe I've got these pulsing boxes that are these fallbacks waiting for data to be loaded. But then essentially, you wait, you just wait. So even if one of those dynamic things comes back in a few milliseconds, you're going to be waiting for it. So again, it's not the greatest way to do that. And then again, you could make as many HTTP calls as you want to. That's perfectly fine. But it is really cool to use the capability of streaming in some way in order to do that. Okay, so how do we do that? Let's talk about it. WebSockets are one way that we can do that. So again, we're going to use HTMX here because HTMX has some of these things built in, so it just makes it really easy to do on the front end. You don't need to use HTMX to do this. This is all possible with other, writing it yourself or using other front-end languages or front-end frameworks and stuff to deal with this. There's nothing special about HTMX here. It's just, I really like it because it does so much for me that it is just really, really nice. Okay, so a couple things. Let's go to HTMX and learn a little bit about WebSockets first. So we'll go to HTMX here and go to their docs. Probably don't need it that big. And over here on their docs, they have a WebSockets and SSE section. So the way that their WebSockets and SSE work is that the server-side events, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, you do need to use a plugin in order to make that work. The WebSockets, I believe, just run right out of the box, right? I think it says that. Let's see. Let's go into the WebSockets here. Be migrated to extension, which is new. So I think it's built in still. But it does say it's going to use an extension, but the extension doesn't exist yet. So anyways, I don't think I'm using an extension with it. But anyways, so here's what we want to do. We want to go ahead and just use this snippet of code. And I'm going to jump over to our template here, and then just down the bottom of our template, just so that we don't have to create anything new. I'm going to go ahead and drop in this HXWS section here. Now it asks you for what URL you want to connect onto. The way that Ampt environments are set up by default is that you can just use a WSS connection directly to the main endpoint, and that'll automatically route for you and route you to the WebSockets that are running in that app. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second, but essentially, so here's, we just going to connect to /. Now this is just giving us an ID of chat room, and then this is going to give us a box to type something into. So let's just add a class here so that we can see this. So we'll add a border, and we'll just add a padding of 2 so that we can see it. So this will respond automatically on click. You could also submit the form as well, but we don't need to do that, and this should be fairly simple to see. All right, so we've now created a and actually, why don't I do this? Class equals border. We'll do border blue. Oops, border blue 500. We'll do a padding of 4, and we'll make it pretty and rounded like that. Okay, save that. All right, so what this should do is in our thing over here, when I refresh this, hold on a second. Let me actually do one other thing here. I'm going to get rid of, we don't need this. Actually, you know what I'm going to do this. I'm going to just change this so that, well, I guess this can stream. Oh, I'm going to get rid of this artificial wait, though. That was what was causing it to load slowly. And by the way, just in case people, if you didn't notice this, I know a lot of you have watched stuff about how Ampt works as well. When I make a change here, so this is just my local machine here. So when I make a change and I do something here, let's see. So I don't know, any change that I make, if I make a change to the user thing here, and whatever I want to do. So if I want this to be, test like this. If you watch down here, as soon as I save this does a quick sync, and it syncs instantaneously. So when I refresh this on my live sandbox, I will see that I actually have this running right here. So this is how quickly this works. So it's pretty cool. So I'm going to actually go back though, because I do want to get rid of this user stuff here, because it is just not necessary. So if I'm just this out, then it didn't like that. Oh, I know why it didn't like that, because it does want to see this. And actually, I mean, one of the things that I can do just to make this even simpler, is I can just do fraglets, change this to a render, and then this is just rendering a static page. Or at least it should be. Let me try that again. Refresh. There we go. Okay. So, and I'm going to just hide this stuff here so that we don't see any of that up there. Okay. Refresh. Okay. So now what I have is just this box here. And I have my little input box there. And if we go to the network tab and click over to WS, you'll see that it's trying to make a connection to my back end, and it is not, it's not happening. So let me try this again so we can see. So this is trying to connect, and actually, I think it will connect. Right, it will connect because there will be a WebSocket there, but we haven't written any code to handle that yet. So switching protocols, right? Yeah, so no messages or anything there. But if we wanted to, and we actually type something in here, so this is a test and hit enter, this will actually send that request over the WebSocket. But we don't see anything happening with these WebSockets. We haven't. We don't have any way to capture those messages or anything like that. So let's go ahead and add that. So over here on the Ampt, we're talking about these different, on the Ampt documentation, we're talking about these different services that are available, or these different interfaces that are available. One of them is WebSockets. And so essentially the way that WebSockets work is you can just import WebSockets from the Ampt SDK, and then we'll give you a connected handler, a disconnected handler, and a message handler in order for you to interact with those and listen for different events on those channels. And then the other thing, you have the option of doing, hold on, let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see the... There we go. So you can send messages using the connection ID that you get. Again, you can connect from a client if you want to use WSCat. That's possible to do as well. It gives you information on limits and so forth. But essentially what we want to do first is we just want to listen for this connected event. So I'm going to copy this code here, and we'll go over to our index, and I'm going to paste this up at the top, and then actually copy this. So WS is the actual interface, and then socket connection is a type that you can use so that if you want to sort of know what's going on, you can, or you want to scope it better, you can do it that way. You can type it. All right. So essentially, what this is going to do is this is going to do WS, listen for a connected, and then it's going to give me a connection that will come back. And for now, I'm just going to go ahead and log like this, and I'm going to log connected. Oops. Those are my emojis. Try that again. Log connected and log the connection. And I'm just going to log the connection ID. There's a whole bunch of stuff that comes with that, and it's actually not called connection ID. It's called connection ID, like that. So there's a whole bunch of other information on the connected block that you can look at, or the connected variable that you can look at. Object, I guess. But connection ID is the one that we really care about, because that's the one. We want to make sure that we need that connection ID. Now, this is going to use API WebSockets, sort of maybe to answer ZZ's question. So this is going to use, again, API WebSockets, or API Gateway WebSockets, which means that you do need to maintain that connection ID. We can do that super easily with Ampt data, which just is DynamoDB, which we'll show in a second. But let's go ahead and look at this so that we can actually see what we're getting here. So if I come back over here, go to this user manager page, and I will refresh this. This will create a new connection, and then we'll actually get that log here. So now we're actually seeing this connection ID that's happening here, which is perfect. And then the other thing that we want to make sure we do is we want to be able to handle the disconnected event. So I'm going to copy this disconnected event so that we have this here, and then we can log that we were disconnected, and we'll get a connection. We'll get the connection ID that was disconnected and the reason why it was disconnected. And so one of the things too to remember when you're in your developer sandbox like this, we're constantly updating the back end and making some changes and things like that. So you'll see some disconnects and stuff like that. But again, what's great about HTMX is it'll automatically reconnect you to all these different things, which is really nice. Okay, so let me just clear this out, and I will refresh. And now we will see, all right, so we've got this connected here. This other one was disconnected. Again, like I said, when you're refreshing, all kinds of things happen. But we see that we've got this connected. We've got, so this was our new one that got connected, and the old one got disconnected here. So again, now we have this, WebSocket running here, and we can see our messages and so forth. And the last thing we want to do, just so that we can interact with this, is we want to use the on message. So we'll grab the on message like this, and we'll pop this in here. And so now we have this on message handler. And so anytime there is, and by the way, this says if the message content is JSON formatted, it's automatically parsed, which is super nice. So we'll get the connection ID and we'll get the data. So let me save this. And I'll go over here and I'm just going to clear this so we don't have that in our way. Come over here and I will give this a quick refresh. So we'll see that our old one gets disconnected. Our new one is connected. And now if we go into this new one here and we send some data, say hello from the front end, and submit that, then we will get that nicely parsed request here along with our connection ID and the message, and then some headers around this as well. So this is just nice because HTMX will automatically format this for us, automatically send this for us. So it is pretty cool. Okay, so one of the things that we want to try to do, just so that we're so that we don't have to worry about we don't have to worry about managing the connections while we're sort of changing stuff here. The easiest thing to do is actually just go ahead and maintain those connections somehow. And the way that we want to sort of maintain those connections or handle those connections, remember those connections, a super easy way to do that is just to use Ampt data. So what I'm going to do is I've already imported Ampt data up here. This was just part of the thing. And if you're not familiar with Ampt data, it is super simple interface to use. It essentially just gives you a DynamoDB table, and you just do gets and sets. So set and get data. Very, very simple, easy to use. So what we want to do in here, go back to here, is we want to go ahead and every time we get a connection, we want to use that. We want to save the connection information. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to do a wait, and then I'm going to do a data.set, and then there's a couple different ways we can do this, but I'm going to use a collection. So I'll do connections, and then there'll be connections and then the connection ID, and then we can write some information about that connection. If we want to, we can make this async as well so that this gives us a wait. So what this will do right now is this will write a record to the database that has a key of connections : whatever the connection ID is. So we could actually list all the connections by running connection star with a get command. But this will just be nice because this will tell us more information. Now we can add more data to this and do whatever we want, but really the only thing that we need right now is just the connections, is just the connection ID, and we can pull that back from the database pretty easily if we want to use that to send some messages. And again, there's different ways you could do this. You could use labels, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the first part that we want to do. The other thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that if it gets disconnected, make this async like this. Oops. Like that. We want to make sure that we remove this connection. Okay, so I'm just going to type in remove here, and we don't have to use a second parameter. So this will go ahead and create and remove connections for us, so that we don't have to worry about maintaining that state anymore. So when a new connection gets created, it'll be generated, and then when it's disconnected, it will it'll automatically be removed. All right, so that should be handled for us. And one of the things that we can do if we want to actually see how this works is we can click open or type in open here. This will open us to this particular, to our dashboard. So I'll log in here. And this is our demo SSE. And then this is my developer sandbox, and I can go into data, and it looks like there's an update available. Let me reload this and then just give it a quick refresh. So if I make this a little smaller here, and I get all my items. I have a couple of those items that are, that were from my users. I'm just going to go ahead and delete those so that they don't get in our way. And now I have this connection right here that is, oops, okay. This is this connection right here. So this is giving me that ID with connections and so forth. Now, if I disconnect from this, and if we look, we watch over here, we see that we're connected with that that thing there. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out just so that there's not that extra junk. And now if I was on this user page here and I was to disconnect, so I'll just go to /test or something like that, then this will disconnect that there. And then that should have triggered in our database to remove this particular connection. So let me cancel there. And if I get all items, now that is gone. Okay, so we've got our connections being maintained for us. Oops. Just go back to the main page here. So again, this should create a new connection, and we should have this connection in our database here, which we do. Sorry, I was trying to zoom in like that. Okay, so that's there. Perfect. And now, whenever we get a message in, we can actually look up the connection. So if we wanted to do something, if we wanted to, look up a bunch of different connections, and again, we could create groups. We could do all kinds of ways in which we could say all these connections are part of this group and things like that, or this particular chat. And if we want to do sort of a broadcast message. But anyways, what this gives us the ability to do is now we can easily pull back these. We can easily pull back these connections. And now that we have the connections means that we can actually send messages to these connections. So obviously, if we wanted to, we could write something on the back end here that, did something that would actually, handle messages being sent and do that here automatically, which is what you would normally do, like probably have some way that somebody else submits a message and then that message submits it back to the group and they do some of these other things. You could do it that way. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to shortcut this just so that we can see it actually work. And I'm just going to do a new script called send.js. This is not being pulled into the back end in any way. This is just a local script. I could put this in a scripts folder or something like that. But I'm going to import here the WS from our from Ampt Ampt SDK. I have too many M's in there. Ampt/SDK, like that. Okay. And then what I can do from this is I can actually then send messages to the WebSocket. So I'll do await, and it's just ws.send, and then you need the connection ID, and then I'll say hello from Ampt. Like this. Okay, so this is just sending text, right? And we'll get into why we want to do something different in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and just copy this, the latest WebSocket connection that we have. Just again, we can look this up with data. We'll do that in a second. But then I'm just going to run send.js like this. And so this will actually go and just send that message. So if I go back over to my page over here, in my latest connected, whichever one is my latest connected here, should be this one. Oh, this one here. I see that I sent this message, hello from Ampt. And if I come back over here, like this, like a little bit smaller. So hello from Ampt. 1, 2, 3, save this and send this like this, then we should see this pop up over here as well. Oh yeah, hello from Ampt, 1, 2, 3. Well, that was pretty fast. Hello from Ampt, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hello from Ampt, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So anyways, that's how we can send messages back and forth. But we're not actually doing anything with the message. It's just, it's there. It's not coming back. So two things I want to do. First, I want to pull this back from our data so that I don't have to remember the connection name. So import data from @ampt/data like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do, let's see, connections, const connections equals await data Interesting how it guesses some of the things. Data.get. And I'm just going to do connections : star like this. I'll comment that out for a second to show you how this works. So if we were to log this and just log the connections, then when we ran this here, this should go ahead and give us back a list of our connections, which it does. So it shows us here are items, here are the values, or here is the here's the key information about the connection itself. So now what I can do is, now that I have a list of connections, I can do let's see, we'll just do a for loop, I guess. So for const connection of connections, and we want to look at connections dot items. Like this, and let's just call this con, like that, or con, I guess con with two N's, why not? So this will loop through this, and this will now send, and this will send based off of a con dot key, and actually we want to take the key and we want to split it on the colon, and we want to take the second item in the array. All right, so that should work there. And then I can type in, this is a test, like that. Clear that out. Oops, spell that correctly, clear, click save. And all right, so now just gonna refresh this, because again, we don't need to worry about that anymore. And then we could just go ahead and hit send.js, and this should load on the most recent version of that, which we see. This is a test. Okay, so that is essentially how WebSockets work. Pretty easy to go that way. And then, like I said, if we sent a message back, hello, hello, and do that, that will send the message back to our server. So now we have a way that we can interact with our WebSocket and the front end. And again, this is what's super nice, is HTMX makes this really, really easy. And the best way that I've found when you're using WebSockets, if you want to actually, again, make changes to the interface, is, and I think it probably talks about this here. I guess it doesn't really explain kind of how you would want to do this. But essentially, what I do is just out-of-band swap. So if you're not familiar with out-of-band, we type in OOB here, and this will be this. And essentially what that is if you have somewhere on the interface that has an ID, you can use the out-of-band swap to actually get responses from a WebSocket, from SSE, which we'll show in a second, and some of these other things. You can use that response, and then you can actually swap out data, and it's pretty cool. The out-of-band swaps are pretty cool stuff. So let's do this. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste this in. This is our send script again. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to paste this code in like this. Now this is saying ID alerts. We don't have an ID alert section, so if we actually go back here, remember what we called it. So we call this our chat room, right? So let's take chat room here, and I'm going to go ahead and put the ID chat room here. Now this is doing a swap true. When you do a swap true, what that essentially does, let's see if I can format this better. And I'm just going to do hello, like this. That's not what we used before, right? And I just make sure that we didn't. No, it says test. Okay, good. So we'll just say hello, exclamation point, not hello one, like this. Okay, so now we've got hello, and what this will do is this will, when it receives this message, this should swap out what we have in this test box completely, by the way. So this isn't just going to, I'm going to close that down because we should not need to be able to see that anymore. Make this a little bit smaller here. All right, so now if I'll just refresh this just for good measure. I'll hit clear here. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run send. Now when I run send, what this should do is this should send the message, and then it should completely swap out. Okay, so you see that it did that there. So now this says hello. This completely replaced that element. So this is what's really cool about HX swap out of bounds, or OOB, is you can put any valid swap in here. So I could say inner HTML like this. If I do inner HTML and I refresh this, then what this will do is this will take whatever content is in here and it will swap out the content that is within that there. So if I run send again, this will send that message for me, but what it will do differently is that now it will just swap out the actual content. So it didn't change the outer thing there. What else is cool about this is that you can do, let me make sure I get this right, but it's append, or I think it's next, let's do this, HX swap. I love good documentation. So you can do inner HTML, outer HTML before begin, which inserts response before the target element. So you could actually insert something before that chat box. After begin, which inserts the response before the first child of the target element. Before end, after end, delete, none. So delete, you can just delete the target, which is kind of cool if you wanted to do something that removes things from a page, also very cool. Or none, where it just doesn't do anything with it, but the out-of-band stuff would still be processed. I don't know if none would work in a out-of-band one, maybe, I'm not sure. But essentially what we want to do is we want to insert the response after the last child of the target element. So we want before end, and that should give us what we want to basically simulate sort of like a chat room that's appending messages. So I'm going to do before end like this, and then I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to refresh so that says test. And now when I send these events, and by the way, I'm running this script locally, so it just takes a second and has to get the data and do some of these other things. So this just appended hello. If I run it again, this will append hello again. It is just appending the text, so obviously that's why it's sticking it together. If I wanted to do on a different line, then I could do something like this /div. And now I will refresh this. And so now if we sent this, so many listeners. So now we get we get hello, clear out that mess, and then run send again, and we'll get another hello. Like that. Okay, so a couple different things that we can do now, which is, so now we've got that sort of working there. We still haven't really done anything interesting with the data coming in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this here. Actually, I'm going to copy all of this so that I have this. And I'm going to make this super simple when we get a message, rather than having to look up the data, which we can. I do that. Well, I'll just do the same exact thing. Why not? I'll just do this. I'll just do this over here. So when a message is received, what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all the connections. And again, this has to be async like this. So I'm going to loop through those connections. I'm calling this data here, so it doesn't like that. So we'll call this something other than data. We'll call this, how about input? Okay, so we get the input here, and then what we want to do is we'll get our list of connections. We'll loop through those connections, which will include our own connection. We'll do the same thing here, split that, and then we'll send it. But in this case, and I forgot, hold on one second. I totally forgot what it came in as, so let me just run test here. So this gives us, spit out, I logged data, which I don't want to log data. I want to log input. Input like this, clear this. Oops, what did I do? Clear. All right, so let me try that again. Test. So it's going to be the chat message. Oh yeah, because it must name it whatever I call it here. So it calls it chat message. So I'm going to take chat message like this, and that's going to be on that input, on the input variable that comes in. So then I'm going to do, rather than hello here, I'm just going to echo back what is sent in, and again that would have to be on input dot chat message like that. So it doesn't like the fact that there's no. It's probably wondering, like, can I do that? I always forget how that works. Is it like that? Whatever. Anyways, this should still work. All right, I'm going to refresh this just so that it clears it out. So now whenever I type something here and I say hello from Ampt, and I hit this, this will now echo that for me. And then on the back end, if I wanted to, then again, I could send a message back to it like that. And then of course you can change the way this works so that when I hit submit, it clears it out and some of those other things. But test 1, 2, 3, do that and immediately echoes it back. So that's it. You got a chatbot there you can do some cool things with, and that's just maintaining WebSockets just for you out of the box. So just like that. So that's how that works. All right, we only have a few minutes left. I do want to show you SSE because this is just another way in which you can kind of do something that's kind of like the idea we talked about earlier, where you sort of load a static page and then you want to enhance it after the fact. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why loading a static page is great, especially if you're loading it at the edge, or even just because you want to cache a little bit of it, and you want that user to have that experience as fast as possible. So let's do this. I'm going to go over here and just comment out this whole WebSocket section because we don't need this anymore. So if I refresh over here, this should all be gone, and we should be disconnected and so forth. Okay, so now WebSockets are out of the picture. So let's say that I want to load something relatively static. So I don't have anything, I don't have a static page that I'll load. Actually, I can do a static page. Sure. I mean, it will load dynamically because we're in our dev sandbox. But let's actually do this. Let's go into. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, the point here is that we'll see how it works, and you could do this from a static page if you want to. The point is you're just rendering HTML. Okay. So let's see. In our, I'm going to comment out. I'm just going to comment out this WebSocket stuff too, just so that this is out of our way. Okay, so SSE with HTMX. If you're not familiar with SSE, by the way, you can look it up. It's basically a way to create a long-lived single or unidirectional connection to a web server, and essentially what it does is it just keeps that connection open for you and waits for you to send information on the channel in order for it to get data to you. And you can't send any messages through it, right? You have to post or something like that. But but it does allow you to just kind of hang on a connection and do it that way. So the problem with server-side events, though, especially when it comes to oops, that's not what I wanted to see. When it comes to Lambda functions, is like I said earlier, is that you could keep that connection open for 15 minutes and then it would reconnect automatically. That might be fine. I don't suggest doing that because, again, it just costs too much money, or if you had a bunch of users, it would end up costing too much money. You'd be better off using WebSockets and implementing a WebSocket thing to do it that way. But if you did want to do these progressive enhancements, there's a couple of cool ways that we can do that. Using the SSE stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to copy. So this here talks about sort of putting it, using this HX SSE, how you do the connection and so forth. Let me go in here and just show you, because you do need to use the extension, I believe. So if I click into the server send extension, this just gives me a script that I include here. There might be easier ways to do this, but I'm going to go back into my user.html here, and I'm going to, I'm going to go into my base, because this is where my scripts are. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now we've added SSE capabilities to HTMX, and let me change this to 11 as well. I think it grabs the latest anyways, but maybe not, whatever. All right, so now we have SSE enabled. So if I go into the user template here and I want to implement the SSE, essentially what it does is it says all you got to do is just say SSE-connect, and that will go ahead and connect you to an SSE server. All right, so we'll come over here into our index file here, come down to the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and do. Nope, that's not what we want to do. That's not where we want to put it. Sorry. We want to put it in our user template here, because this is just HTML that we're returning back. So this will use the SSE extension. It'll connect to /chatroom, and then it will do this SSE swap of message and say contents of the box will be updated in real time with every SSE message received from the chat room. Okay, great. Sounds good. I'm going to click save, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to open up our network tab, just so that we can see this quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh. All right, so what you'll see here is, if I go all, this is trying to connect to this chat room thing. It's going to keep trying to connect, This doesn't exist, okay? So it's going to keep trying to connect with basically without there being a connection. So I'm just going to go there to stop that from doing that. There's probably a way to disable it somewhere else, right? But anyways, so I want to make sure that we have a way to respond to that particular message. So to start with, I can just create a new route in here that I will do as app.get, and it is connecting to /chat, right? Oh, chat room. Okay, so /chat, and actually this is a bad. I'm gonna name this SSE, just so that we can see a little differently here. So this will be /SSE, and then this will, this is just going to return, for now, I'll do c.html test, like this. Okay, so this is our SSE endpoint now, and we will save this, and I'll go over here, and we're going to change this to /SSE, like this. And I'll show you how we'll use this in a second. I just want to get it working so that we can start playing around with it. All right, so now if I go back over here, and we reload this main page. So now this has created SSE, but notice that it doesn't like what it's getting back, right? Because the information that it's getting back is not the correct information. So this is going to keep trying to reconnect, because it's not getting an SSE connection. So get off of that. So how do we create a SSE connection behind the scenes with Hono? Okay, so if we go to Hono here, and we go to docs, and we search, and we type in SSE, we have this stream SSE helper, okay? So what we want to do is we want to return a stream SSE event, or stream SSE stream, I guess, an SSE stream that will give us what we need. So I'm going to actually copy this and jump over to my code and go to here, and I'm going to replace this with this. Now we do need to import SSE stream, so we'll import stream, and it's not that. I think it's /streaming, right? Yeah. Okay, so we have that now. So what this is doing is essentially this will send us a message. Cannot find name ID. Oh, because it's here. How about that? Okay, we'll put this just outside here. Like that. Okay, so now what this will do is this will just spit out this message for us, and it will do this write SSE. So every time there's a new message, it will go ahead and send this thing called time update, and send that out and sleep for 1 second in between. I'm going to click save. We're going to come back over to our doc here, and we're going to run this. And now we've got SSE, and if we look at the event stream, we'll see that every second we're getting one of these messages, right? Okay, so great. Now, the problem is that this is going to go on indefinitely, and this is going to keep using that Lambda. So this is keeping a connection open to the Lambda. Lambdas by default, if you don't set a timeout or a connection, we automatically time that out after 29 seconds or 30 seconds by default. But you can extend that all the way up to 5 minutes when you deploy using Ampt. But anyways, we don't want that to be happening, because that is sending way too much information and keeping that connection open, so we don't want that. So what we actually would rather do is we want to send down some additional data. So we can loop through it like this, but this is basically what we care about here, is this write SSE, and then the event name, and then the stream ID itself. Now, if we go into the docs over here, This will basically say that messages consist of an event, a data packet, no other data is allowed. So we want an event name and the data. And then essentially when it says SSE swap, this is saying only swap on that particular event name, right? So it will by default, I think, use message or something like that. You can have it listen for multiple events that will process that. So essentially this message that we're sending down here, these messages are coming down as time update. We put in our user over here that we're looking for a message. So we can just go over here, and again, we can, you can name this anything you want. You can have multiple things that come down. You can have SSE that responds to different types of messages. But what's nice is that essentially we can name these events, and so that it will process them and understand what to do with them. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here and run this again, and now we'll see that we are getting connected to this SSE here. Every time a new message comes in, it is swapping out this data, right? Very cool. So we're getting closer to where we need to be. But there's some things that we want to be able to do. One is we want to be able to stop. We want to be able to stop this particular this once we get the data that we need. And hopefully I'm explaining this well enough. But essentially, let's say that we want to respond back with, and I have this sort of already written out so that we can sort of see it. Let me just copy this. All right, so I'm going to do two things here. First of all, I want to actually have it just list all these different things. So rather than it do, let's see, go to users here. So rather than it do an SE swap message, yes. So this will do this will just swap out whatever the contents of that box are. But we don't just want it to do that. We want to actually fill in some different things. So let me do this. I'm going to create a couple of divs here. And let's call this ID box1 like this, and the class equals border, and we'll do BG color or BG. Let's do this one as red, and do padding of 2 or 5. How about that? And then this will say test, just so there's something in there. And border like this, and I'll create a couple of these, and this will be box 2, 3, 4, and we'll change the colors here. And I know we're almost out of time, or we're over time, but I just want to show you this quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. So I'll change some colors here, and how about green? Okay. All right, so if I come back here and refresh this, oops, that's not found because I clicked off of it. Go back over here. All right, so now we get these 4 different boxes, and we see that this is refreshing down here. So the problem with doing that is that, again, this will replace the content that's in that box. We don't want it to replace the contents in the box, or in this box. We want it to replace the content that is hold on a second. Right. Okay. We wanted to replace okay, so you do a swap and then a target SE swap. Oh, right. Okay. So I was thinking about how you would do some of the. Hold on. Let me show you this. So if you want to do, so there's the swap that will swap it out there, but then you can do, I believe it's the HX. I think it's HX swap. That you could do. What did we say before? We said append after, append before. I think I removed it. Did I remove that stuff from here? Before end, right? Okay. So here we could say, I think this will work if we do before end like that. Okay. All right. Now let me refresh this. This might work. Well, I guess we have to do it to another target. Doesn't matter. We're going to do something different anyways. All right. So what we want to do though is we want to replace box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4. We want to replace the content that's in there. I don't know what this is. Oh, because the handler's timing out after the 29 seconds. So again, once we disconnect it, it does time out. All right, so what we want to do here is we want to have the information that's coming back from this. We want to have that actually write to a specific box as opposed to just spit out this message here. So what we can do is we can take the message, we'll wrap it in a div like this. Okay, and then we can set an ID, which is going to be box, and then we're just going to use whatever the ID is here, like this. And I did this wrong because it should be like this. And again, you'll see that eventually these will time out, right? So that's one of the things we don't want it to do. So I set the box ID, and it should load the data. And so as it loops through from 0 through 4, it should go ahead and replace the data in those boxes. So do this, come back here, and I will hit refresh. And now this should... it also helps if you do this correctly, where we say that this is HX swap OOB, and we'll say true. Actually, what we want to say is inner HTML. Hopefully this is all making sense. Okay, come back over here and we refresh this. And now as those messages come down, we should get them filling in these boxes. Okay, great. So essentially what we can do with this is we could have those boxes automatically load with default content, right? And that could all be static HTML. And then at the bottom, and it loads from the CDN or whatever it is. And then at the bottom of that page, that's when we actually fire off this SSE, this here that's going to go ahead and make this connection and start swapping these events out for us automatically. So we wouldn't want any content here. We don't need that. And this would just allow us to go ahead and fill that stuff in as it comes in. Now, I'm just looping through here in a while loop, but there's a number of different ways that you could do this. So if you needed to do like you wanted to do like a promise.all where you're loading a whole bunch of different resources and so forth, and then as soon as they're available, you go ahead and you spit that back, and you can go ahead and send that down over the SSE stream, and that would write out. All right, so the last thing I just need to show you is this will go on indefinitely, right? And so this is not a technique that you want to use in a Lambda function where it's just going to keep on polling and polling and polling. That would not be great. So we need to tell it to stop. So the easiest way to tell it to stop is essentially just to replace the connector here, right? So if we do here and we just say, what have I called it in the past? How do we call it this? We'll do SSE controller. Oops, controller, like this. All right, so now we have this SSE controller, and now we've just named it. So what we can do with this, which is pretty cool, is once we get to here, once we get to 4, right? So essentially this will say, all right, I want to keep streaming, keep streaming, keep streaming. But what I'm going to do is when I get to 4, so I say if, now again, you would do this a different way, but you say if ID actually is greater than 3, like this, then what we want to do is we want to send another message here. Actually, I could do this even easier. How do I do this? I'll say, while this is true, we'll say if ID 3, you could do this so much better than I'm doing right now, but I'm just trying to make it a little bit simpler. I'm going to do let message like this. And so if the ID is greater than 3, then I'm going to do message is going to plus equal. And we're going to send down a div with an ID of SSE controller. We're going to do a HX swap OOB, and we're just going to swap out the entire container like that. And then we're going to close the div, and we're going to put in here stopped like that. All right, so what this should do is this should now remove the SSE controller with just a div that says stopped, and then that should actually stop the connection for us. So let's go back over here. I'll go ahead and run this, and let's see if this works. So this will fill in. We've got the first one, we've got the second one, we've got the third one, we've got the fourth one, and then it's stopped. And then our SSE connection here is no longer polling, and it's disconnected there. And then I believe what you also want to do is you need to return from the server as well. I think, no, once it's closed, it's closed. But anyways, so imagine what you could do with that. You could go ahead and have a static page that gets loaded, right? And you've got all these fallbacks kind of in place, and then you make a request. It's interesting that it thinks it's French. You make a request to the server, and then in one long request, sort of a long polling request in a sense, you can do all this work in the background and then go ahead and spit that out for you. So anyways, hopefully this was interesting to you. A lot of cool things that you can do. Check out Ampt. Play around with the WebSocket stuff. I'll keep you updated on if we end up going or if we end up launching the IoT stuff, the ability to do, or the IoT core stuff to do broadcast messages with WebSockets. But yeah, so would love to hear what you think about some of this stuff. What can you build with distributed stuff like this, and some cool interactive stuff that you can do to have those real-time communications. So anyways, check out Ampt, getampt.com, ampt.com, and I will see you next week.